Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo.
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I am so excited for you guys to hear from our very next guest. I know you can't all see her, but she is bright and shiny and beautiful and ready to give us so much valuable information. I'm so excited. You're going to have her energy definitely come through. Dr. Betsy Greenleaf is a gynecologist, but she's known as the Vagina doctor. So ladies, men you can listen to, but ladies, this is mostly probably a conversation for you. I'm really excited to have you here, Betsy, because I just find that there's so many. It's not talked enough. Like, no, don't talk about it. It's like there's shame and there's so much that we need to know about our vaginal health because it is part of so much more of our overall health. So anyways, Dr. Betsy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Tony, for having me on here. I know, this is my favorite topic to talk about. So yeah. And it's funny because, I definitely didn't go to medical school to become a gynecologist. It was like the last thing on my radar. And, I tell this funny story. I have a friend who's a podiatrist and we were eating lunch one day when we were in residency. And I look over across the table and I say to her, I was like, ew, how do you look at people's nasty feet all day long? And she looked at me because I'm a gynecology resident. And she's like, are you serious? You're asking me that? And I'm like, oh, you become desensitized in medicine. You don't realize what you're looking at.
Yeah, that's so funny. Wow. Yeah, no, I always I think of the people who, when I go to European Wax Center and they're down there and doing their thing or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, they look at vaginas all day, but you're going in them. That's totally different. Yeah. Totally different. But anyways, before we get into today's juicy topic, I would love for you to just introduce yourself by sharing who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Betsy Greenleaf. I am America's vagina doctor. I am the first board-certified female urogynecologist in the country.
Yes.
And so I'm actually triple board-certified in obstetrics and gynecology, urogynecology, and aesthetics and anti-aging medicine. So some people are like, well, what is a urogynecologist? And this was the question my mom had when I came home and I was like, I'm still for training. Because she's like, is it European, Euro Disney? Is it a fancy gynecologist? And I'm like, no, it's Euro having to do with urology, the health of the bladder, and gynecology. So it's a little more advanced training with having to deal with everything that's in the pelvis. Mm-hmm. So, we really, our pelvic area is basically everything from our belly button down to the top of our thighs. So it has to do with the bladder, the vagina, the reproductive organs, the rectum, the colon, the nerves, the muscles, everything, the ligaments, everything that's in that area. And so that's what urogynecology encompasses. And really, I actually started off in general surgery right out of medical school. And I was one of those people who really wanted to connect with my patients more. So it was funny when we were doing rounds and someone just had their gallbladder or their appendix out. I was like, so how do you feel now that your gallbladder's out? How do you feel? And general surgery is really not that kind of warm and fuzzy type of a specialty. So I kind of realized, that wasn't for me. And then I went into gynecology where I could have more of a relationship with the patients and still do the procedures and still, have that kind of that rapport with the patients.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? How you said that was the last thing you thought you would ever do. And then here you are doing it and, and doing it well, you definitely, I know that you've been on the media a few times and you really are known as America's vagina doctor, so you're clearly getting your name out there and you're doing something right. So what I would love to first start with is I feel like there's a lot of myths out there about vaginal health. And I I feel like there's a few that you could probably share that are like the most common. And I would love for you to educate the listeners of kind of why those are not true. So what are those top myths?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's just start with the word vagina. Like there was a study that 65% of women are uncomfortable saying that word vagina. And yet 80% of us will have a pelvic health condition at some point in our lives. So I think one of the key things is we need to be talking about those parts, no matter what you call them. And there's a whole laundry list of what we can call those areas. Because if we don't talk about it, we can't ask for help, we can't heal. And really 50% of the 50% of the population has a vagina. So, and this is an area that if we don't think about it unless there's a problem, but then when there's a problem, that's all we think about. And it really affects so many aspects of our lives. Because just think, if you're like itchy or uncomfortable, you're sitting at your desk at work, you can't be itching. You're sitting there, you're like wiggling in your seat, you're like looking around going like, oh, does anybody know that there's something wrong? It becomes all consuming. And, this affects like our reproductive, our fertility, this affects our sex life. So there's so many aspects of the vagina that really affect our whole well-being. And so I think, one of the biggest myths is about odor, and that people are very self-conscious about odor. And especially there's this kind of belief that with odor that there's like, if there's a funky odor down there, that you're like broken or dirty or something, something it kind of reflects on your morality. When honestly, when there's an odor problem, it just means that the bacteria in the vagina is off.
Right.
So we have this healthy bacteria called lactobacillus. And it's actually fascinating how like our whole bodies, like we really have to interact with bacteria in our bodies to be healthy. And so the lactobacillus lives in the vagina. And when we're young and we're menstruating, our vaginal tissue is very thick and healthy. And when it's being exposed to like levels of estrogen, it's going to keep growing and growing. And then when that tissue sloughs off and dies, the lactobacillus eats that sloughed off tissue. Because those old cells contain something called glycogen. And in return, the lactobacillus will eat the glycogen. That's what it survives on. And in return, the lactobacillus bacteria will produce hydrogen peroxide, which makes the vagina very acidic and will keep the bacteria in balance and chase away the bad guys that will cause infections or cause odor. So the moment there's an odor, and like we'll talk, the vagina naturally has an odor. Like there's so many. I was actually just in the pharmacy. I haven't put them out yet, but I did a whole bunch of filmed videos of all the products that are out there for odor. Yeah. And most of the products there are like soaps and deodorants, and they're just covering it up. And number one, those products are like really incredibly irritating to down there. Right. So we should stay away from them. But the thing is, we're not meant to smell like roses or creamsicles or, whatever they're selling. They're supposed to kind of have this almost like a yogurty type of like odor. But if someone's noticing a fishy odor, fish odor comes directly from bacteria that's out of balance. Okay. So anything that's fishy smelling, that automatically means that there's an imbalance of the bacteria. If it's yeasty smelling like bread, then there means that there can be yeast there. And these aren't things that we just cover up, but there's things that we can work with. So, and it's definitely not to be embarrassed about, because almost every woman at some point in their life is going to have this kind of issue.
Right. Which is what I kind of wanted to say in the beginning, which is there's a lot of shame around, like if you get a UTI or a yeast infection, it's like, you're almost like afraid to, even go to the counter. I still get embarrassed to buy like pads or tampons at the counter. Like it's stupid that but it's true, right? Like that is, unfortunately, I think there's like a stigma, or it's just not as normal as like if you have an imbalance of bacteria and, you have another sort of like strep throat or something like that, and the bacteria comes in that way. Like there's, it shouldn't be this whole like fear of, getting help or speaking out about it. And it's normal. It happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it. And it's tough too, because I've seen with patients too, where their partners have misinterpreted it. Things like if there's like an odor, or they're getting recurrent vaginal infections, or they're getting recurrent bladder infections, where the partners have thought like, oh, you must be cheating on me. Like that has nothing to do with it. Like just sometimes like stress will throw off the bacterial balance. Our diets are big in vaginal health. It's actually amazing how much our gut health and our vaginal health are connected.
Yeah. And you mentioned lactobacillus, and I think of probiotics, and I think of that it's I feel like that's probably the most studied probiotic that we have, and also the one that like with the most data to support it,
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about because you hear about the gut brain connection.
Yes.
But I know that there's a brain gut vagina connection. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So, this is one of those ones like, okay, which one do we start at? But I'll start with the gut, because that's probably the easier one. And when we'll go out, well, first of all, I think our gut is just amazing. And we have to have this nice balance of bacteria in our gut to keep us healthy, because 90 to 95% of our serotonin, our happy hormone, is made in our gut. So if we're eating inflammatory foods, our gut's going to be off. We're more likely to have anxiety, depression. So that's where the gut and the brain is connected. 80% of our immune system is made in our gut. So if our gut is off, then we're more likely to get sick. And, which is not great around the winter months, or even with, COVID that's been going around for the last couple of years. So, and then in turn, like if we're under mental stress, we know that the mental stress can also throw off our gut. But where this also connects with the vagina is that for women, we have our rectum, our anus, and our vagina, and the urethra, the tube we pee through, are so close together. So if the bacteria in our intestines is off, no matter how clean we are, there's still a possibility of that bacteria getting up into the vagina and throwing off the bacterial balance. And then what they're finding out is it's not just that it's going to cause recurrent urinary tract infections or recurrent vaginal infections, but that there's this feedback loop, and they believe researchers are working on it now. They believe it's through the vagus nerve, that if the bacteria is off in the vagina, there's a feedback loop through the vagus nerve to the brain that goes, all right, this is not the most ideal time to be reproducing. And so the thing is, our body doesn't know the difference between we want to make a baby versus we want to have fun. So, and have sex. So what ends up happening is the body goes, okay, well, things aren't right down below. It's not time to make a baby. So we're going to shut down everything. And what they do is it dampens our sex drive and actually affects our fertility. Pardon me. Okay. So, yes. So that if the bacteria is off, that now affects our brain. No, but if we're stressed, that also is going to throw off the vagina. Is going to throw off reproduction, because if we're stressed, that will also divert all our hormones, because the process by which we make our normal hormones, our estrogen, our testosterone, our progesterone, our sex hormones, it's the same process by which we make stress hormones. So if we're under stress, whether it's physical stress, mental stress, the body goes, oh, you know what? It's not time to be reproducing. So instead of those hormones coming down the pathway and going into your sex hormones, they're going to go and make a diversion to the right or left. And now they're going to be making our stress hormones, which increase our cortisol. And when our cortisol increase, that affects our gut health. And now we have all these problems with the gut health. And that also puts us at higher risk of infection. So we can be at higher risk for yeast infections. And so it's amazing how all these systems are completely connected with each other.
Yeah, they're completely connected. It's crazy. And I can't stress enough how much stress really affects everything, absolutely everything. So you brought up sex drive, and I think that it's so important to talk about, because so it's clear that when you're stressed out, I tell a lot of clients who are struggling with infertility, I mean, there's many things you can do, as you know, but stress is like a really big key to helping with the to helping to create a baby, if they can minimize that in any way. But you mentioned sex drive, and I feel like I would love for you to talk about what decreases sex drive other than stress? Because we know stress will definitely decrease it, but are there certain, we hear about aphrodisiacs and certain foods and, but like what is really making someone's sex drive either go up or down?
Well, so stress is number one, because our brain is our most important sex organ. So if our brain is not there,
especially for women, are you speaking in general or are you speaking
in general, but more so for women? Yes.
I feel like for women, that's huge. Like your brain needs to be on board.
Yeah. The brain's not there. Nothing is going to happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think it's hormones. And in some ways it is hormones, but we just talked about how stress will, like you could be somebody that's taking hormones. Sorry. And, people always come in, they're like in that menopausal period. And they're like, oh, my sex drive is down. Give me hormones. And that's going to fix everything. But it's not if you're stressed, because if I'm giving you hormones, they're just going to go into the stress hormones anyway. So inflammation is the next big thing. And I think the majority of inflammation that we see in people's bodies now comes from gut health. It comes from the food we eat. So, we definitely see that with that standard American diet. So diets high in sugar, high in processed foods, in some people it may be dairy, and some people it may be gluten. We know that all these foods can cause a lot of inflammation, and the body perceives inflammation as stress. And once again, stress dampens the whole sex drive. Mm-hmm. So we really need to be eating like foods that support our gut so that we can decrease that inflammation and support the sex drive, and also support the healthy bacteria in our gut. Because if we don't have healthy bacteria in the gut, you're not going to have healthy bacteria in the vagina, and then kind of goes, we go back in circles again. I think, I start thinking about what did we evolve to be like? And I'm like, well, obviously, we didn't evolve to be eating Twinkies. So I apologize for keep doing that.
Oh no, you're totally fine. You're totally fine. I hear you. So we know that it's not it's more of like having those foods in excess, and then often also too, if you have some sort of sensitivity or intolerance to gluten or dairy, then it's gonna, and you notice any sort of symptoms, it's obviously triggering that. So I think it honestly comes down to listening to your body. And really, like you said, Matt, it sounds like the answer still is stress management, like regardless, whether it's like through physical, emotional stress or physical stress, it's learning how to, minimize inflammation.
And, there's no pill. Everybody thinks that Viagra is like a horny pill, and it's not. Like all Viagra is a blood flow pill. So for men, when they take Viagra, if their brain is not in that mood, Viagra is not going to do anything. So the brain has to be in the mood, and then the Viagra helps to increase blood flow so the man can get an erection. It actually works in women too. So if women take Viagra and their mind is in the right place, it's going to increase blood flow, which will help with sensitivity and lubrication. So really, they haven't come up with any pills that put you in the mood, because everybody's brain is different. Right. And like I said, the brain is being the most important sex drive. And as we get older, when we're younger, everyone's like, a lot of patients will come in, they'll be like, oh, I don't have the sex drive like I did like when I was 18. Well, you also don't have the responsibilities and the stress, that you had when you're 18 that you have now. You have a lot more. So,
yeah, 100%, 100%. I feel like there's so many ways we can go with this. You mentioned vaginal dryness, and I've heard that during menopause, that is a common symptom. So other than taking Viagra, are there any other tips for that?
Oh, there's tons for that. And so the dryness is becoming from, as we go into perimenopause and menopause, our estrogen levels start to decrease. Mm-hmm. And so when that happens, the vaginal tissue starts to thin out. It doesn't grow as thick and healthy. And then this is also why women in perimenopause and menopause and on birth control and who are pregnant and who are breastfeeding, those are all low estrogen states. They tend to have more issues with the bacteria in the vagina being thrown off. So they are more likely to have infections, more likely to have bladder infections, and more likely to have sex drive issues because it's going to affect that microbiome of the vagina. Now, for the pregnant and breastfeeding woman, I'm going to be like, talk to your doctor about what's the options, because when you're pregnant breastfeeding, there's not as many options. But for women who are on birth control or more so perimenopausal or menopausal, there's tons of options, from prescription estrogen that can be applied, creams that can be applied vaginally. There are a couple different pills that trigger the vaginal tissue to think that there's estrogen there, and it's not really estrogen. That's a prescription. But then the whole area of regenerative medicine is, I think, really where it's at and is fascinating. That's anywhere from using laser, like light energy, to regenerate the vagina, using radio frequency to regenerate the tissue, using platelet-rich plasma. And so how those, and red light therapy also. So how those all work is they're almost like biohacking. Is the laser came out on the market first in 2016 in the United States. So it's been out in Europe for much longer. But it just uses light energy to penetrate the vaginal tissue and make a microscopic injury. So it sounds terrible, but really it's so microscopic that you don't notice it. But the body goes, oh, wait a minute, something's here and I have to heal this injury. And so it'll flood that area with growth factors. And when that area gets flooded with growth factors, it actually triggers the vagina to regrow back to the way it was when you were younger, but without having to use hormones. So that's why. And so then they started realizing in that field that, oh, wait a minute, if lasers work, and lasers have been used since the 1980s for cosmetic purposes. And I wish I was the one who came up with like, well, let's just try using it in the vagina and see what happens. Like we've known this like for cosmetic purposes. So then that field like exploded. It's like, oh wait, all the things that we use cosmetically to rejuvenate skin can be also applied to the vagina. And that's when they started using things like radio frequency. So radio frequency uses heat to regenerate the tissue, because we know that when we heat tissue to a certain level, it will also trigger the body to send in growth factors, make everything regrow, regenerate collagen to make things more elastic. Because without that, that tissue becomes thin. It's very dry. It tends to crack very easily. So, I mean, it's kind of like, if you ever think about, if your lips get super, super chapped and then you try to go to smile and you crack your lips, that's like what's happening to the vagina when we're like going through menopause and that estrogen level is very low. It doesn't stretch as well. But then, the radio frequency, there's also platelet-rich plasma. That's where they actually draw your own blood and they take the plasma out of the blood and then they actually inject it back into the vaginal tissue. There's something called microneedling, and a lot of people have their faces microneedled. It's taking very tiny needles, creating like little microscopic injuries into that tissue. Same thing. Then there's some home therapy, is like red light therapy. So we know that exposing tissue to different wavelengths of light will actually trigger different responses. And red light is actually a very healing frequency of light. So there's a couple companies that are out there that make these home devices that kind of look like a vibrator, but they have red lights on it, and you just kind of put it in there and you use that to regenerate it. And then there's another company that does something called carboxytherapy. So carboxytherapy is using carbon dioxide to attract oxygen into the tissue. And so years ago, you used to have to inject the carbon dioxide into the tissue, but there was a woman who worked with scientists out of Japan, and they came up with a gel version of this carbon dioxide that when you just put it in the vagina, it'll attract oxygen into that tissue, and that will trigger the tissue to start regrowing. Wow. So there's so many, and like
there's
every
so
time
many
I
options.
Turn around, there's more and more options. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Especially for people who get a little worried about using hormones, which hormones in themselves are not terrible. It's the biggest problem with hormones is synthetic hormones. And there's a good portion of the prescription medicines on the market are synthetic hormones, because from a business standpoint, synthetic hormones can be patented and be sold by companies. Or when you're using natural hormones, you're not having as many problems, because synthetic hormones are processed in the body in a different way, and they tend to make metabolites that get broken down, and they have toxic metabolites. And it's those synthetic hormones that increase our risk of cancer, not necessarily the natural hormones. So,
right. So I've heard that, well, I haven't heard. So I had somebody ask me a question recently that they were told by their doctor that they should be taking estrogen by their gynecologist. I can't remember for what for. This is like a question through a friend. It's like not, it wasn't, the question wasn't to me, but they were, and the person wanted to know, were there foods that she can eat or things that she can do to increase her estrogen levels without having to take estrogen? And is that, I'd love for you to like speak on that. Is that's
possible? Yes and no. So yes, like a lot of the soy has a lot of plant-based estrogens in them. And so, but the one thing we get concerned about with soy is where's the soy product coming from? Because we're more concerned about insecticides, pesticides, because they act as endocrine disruptors. So they can actually attach to the estrogen receptors and make the body think that there's more estrogen there than there actually is. And those endocrine disruptors, those toxins can actually cause more harm than good. So trying to find organic soy is a little bit more difficult.
I feel like it's common.
Yeah. So and then
like we're talking about like tofu, edamame, like
if
you go to like Trader Joe's, I feel like that's their only option. Like I don't think it's too hard to find.
Yeah, as long as it's organic and then there's better options with that. When it comes to and I'm thinking more of the herbs and the supplements, there's things like red clover can help increase estrogen. There's what I like, it's called Siberian rhubarb root that you can find usually in a supplement form, sometimes evening primrose oil or black cohosh. But they're things that are kind of hit or miss. Not everybody responds to them the way that they're supposed to.
Right.
And then more so, I love a lot of the cruciferous vegetables, not so much that they're increasing your estrogen, but they help you process your estrogen better. So like raw broccoli, raw cauliflower, all of those, they all contain something called diindole methane, which helps you process like the bad metabolites of the hormones. So, and it has to be raw. They found that, like, I love broccoli, but when you cook broccoli, you kind of degrade that compound. So it's the actual raw cruciferous vegetables. When you cut it or when you're actually chewing it, that's what releases that chemical.
Understood. Amazing. Okay. Let me see what other questions I have for you. Any other myths that you've heard that are worth debunking? I feel like we kind of went through that quickly.
I have seen, let me talk about there's a lot of home remedies that come up. Like a lot of people will think about putting yogurt in their vaginas.
Really?
And yeah, I've seen that over the years, especially if they're
how about let's do this. Let's do what not to do.
Okay. Yeah. Do not put yogurt. You don't need to put yogurt. So now, because people are like, oh, I need to get more of that healthy bacteria, I'm going to put yogurt, but you don't need the milk sugars in the vagina. So,
right, and your body can digest it when you eat it.
Yeah.
And you can use it that way. But
taking probiotics, eating fermented foods. Honestly, I have over the years, and make sure, check with your doctor first before doing this. I have had patients take probiotics, open them up, make a paste with some distilled water and to try to get some bacteria directly in the vagina. Okay, wow. But you don't need to be putting, you do not need to be putting yogurt. I've seen people put garlic, because garlic does have antibacterial properties to it.
Okay, but the problem is, get that when you eat it.
So yeah, you could.
But I hear what you're saying, like they think in their brain it's like more direct.
More so, I like boric acid. Like if anybody wants to put anything in their boric acid, there's so many different boric acids. My favorite is one called PhD Feminine Health. But because boric acid will help to acidify the vagina and will help that bacteria kind of get back in balance. Because a lot of the reasons that we have problems with the vagina is that the pH balance, the acid-base balance has gone out of whack.
Mm-hmm.
So, actually, it's been really interesting on TikTok recently. I had a post that's up to like 220,000 views right now. People talking about how to wash properly, and that's a really hot topic. So I was really surprised that there's so much confusion on how to wash. Now,
let's share.
As gynecologists, we always tell people just water. Like all you need is water.
Yeah.
And then it's funny because I've been watching all the reactions to people. They're like, what about the odor? What about like water will actually dilute anything. It will, dilute oils in the skin. It will dilute dirt. It's going to wash it up. Water will clean.
Yeah.
So all you really need is water. Now, I did get a lot of people who are like, well, I've been using soap for years and never had a problem. Well, listen, if you're using something and you've never had a problem with it, then fine. Like, don't fix it if it's not broke. But honestly, a lot of times with soaps, they have fragrances, they have colorings in them that can be very irritating to that delicate tissue, and that can throw off the microbiome. It will dissolve the protective oils of the vulva, which can make it more irritating. So you don't need harsh detergents. You don't need harsh soaps. So honestly, like water is really the best thing. But some people also, if they're getting irritation, some people have a problem with toilet paper because toilet paper is bleached, and the bleach can irritate some people.
Interesting. So you're saying what toilet paper would you use instead? You're able to find this more so now than you used to be able to. Unbleached toilet paper would be the best. Where? How? Why didn't I even notice that?
Like you can find organic unbleached toilet paper.
Oh my God. How much money is that? That's got to be.
Yeah. But like I say, like it's one of those things like if it doesn't bother you, then you're fine.
No,
but if you're having problems.
One day my boyfriend picked up, I think it was on sale. It was like this recycled, it was literally brown. It looked like paper towels.
Yeah.
It was so uncomfortable. I was like, never again. I don't care that you spent, it was like they say it was like 89 cents a roll or something, like something crazy cheap. But I'm like, I don't care. Never again. This was not okay. I don't care how healthy, quote unquote, this is or good for the environment. Like that was not pleasant.
And then, and douching is really not healthy for the vagina.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Because what happens is the vagina and then the cervix, uterus, and fallopian tubes are an open system. So the fallopian tubes are open at the end. And so if you're flushing things out and you're flushing it too vigorously, you could basically wash bacteria from the vagina up into your uterus, through your fallopian tubes, out into your abdominal cavity, and you could end up with a serious infection. So, not a big fan of douching. It also throws off the microbiome balance. If you have to do it under doctor's guidance, then I would say don't very slow pressure, not fast, vigorous pressure, because you don't want to just kind of more of like a drip, if anything. So
I've heard not to do. I've never done it. I've heard it.
Yeah.
Luckily I got that early on. It was like a trend, I want to say, like in middle school. And I was like, I heard not to do this. So I'm glad I didn't try to be part of the trend.
And most people are doing it because they're concerned about odor, which that's going to actually just aggravate odor issues because it's going to throw off the microbiome.
Right. And it's kind of like hiding what's actually going on. Like you probably need to either adjust your diet or to, clean with just water or manage your stress or, take a probiotic. Like there's, you don't want to mask what's actually going on.
Yeah. And, there's so many different hygiene things. I think the biggest thing with tampons that most people know is really to change them. Ideally, if you can change them every 4 hours, but 6 hours, because the longer you leave and they're just holding in bacteria. Mm-hmm. So you don't want that bacteria to take control. So the Diva cups tend to be a little bit better in that they don't hold bacteria, but some people like them, some people don't.
Yeah, so, I feel like that's more like new.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, this has been so helpful. Any other last minute nuggets or things you want to share before we tell people where they can find you?
Not that I can think of, other than really, we need to open the conversation. And for if any male listeners are there, you need to educate yourself too, because you want to educate yourself for either have a partner, a sister, a mother, an aunt, a friend, everybody gets affected by this. So it is definitely something where we need to talk about it. Pelvic health in general. We say that women have 80% risk of in their lifetime having a pelvic health issue, but their men have risks of pelvic health issues too. And I honestly think that we talk even less about men's problems, other than erectile dysfunction, which seems to be okay, because you see those commercials left and right. But there's a lot of other things that we just need to open up and talk about it and educate yourselves, and don't be embarrassed to ask your doctors. We're used to, there's nothing that people can't ask me that would surprise me. Yeah, I've been asked everything.
Now that you mentioned that, I will say, if you don't feel comfortable, asking your gynecologist a question, you can get a new one. Because I had that experience once. I had one that had assumed I wanted to have I was 26 or 27 at the time. She was very pushy about me having babies and not being on birth control. It was clearly no, thank you. You don't get to tell me how to live who are you? It was crazy. So
yeah, you're the consumer. If you're not happy with somebody you're seeing, you just go find somebody else.
You can change,
and question. Oh, here's really funny.
Yeah.
There's another thing on social media. There was a video with Billie Eilish where she was asked to give a urine sample. And they gave her a cup and they're like, here, go in there and give us a urine sample. And she opened the door. She didn't know which door they were pointing at. She opened the door and she went in and she was in a closet. And she was like, oh, this is weird, but I guess this is what you do. And so she squatted down and peed in the cup in the closet. Of course, many of us miss the cup. That's normal. Don't worry about it. Everybody misses the cup. And peed on the floor. And then she made a TikTok about it, laughing about it afterwards. But my point was, you know what? Sometimes as health practitioners, we do things every single day and we just think oh, people know what we're talking about. But if you don't know what we're talking about, ask. You're not going to insult us. But you sure you want me to go pee in this closet?
Right.
We would be oh no, you need to go to the bathroom, sometimes, we need to be more clear with what our instructions, but at the same time, if we're not, you're not going to insult anybody. Ask us.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my God. Bill, thank you so much for being here. This was so great. Where can people connect with you, follow up with you? I know there's so many other questions that I'm sure people have. I think this was just a great idea to just kind of open the conversation and let people know that it's okay and safe to speak and ask questions. So where can they reach out to you for help?
Yeah, definitely reach out to me on social media. I'm always looking for ideas of things to answer people's questions. So no, I can't specifically answer your specific question on social media, but if you hey, can you do a post on this? I usually will. So any social media, I'm all over the place. The other thing is, as of the new year, we're going to start some women's health wellness courses through Femversity. So that's FEMVERSITY. So university, but femversity.com. And then coming actually in May of 2023, we have the Happy Vagina Rally #2. And it's a free women's health summit. So if you follow me on social media, I will be putting out when the signups for that is available. But if you go happyvrally.com, I think you can actually sign up for the wait list.
And where would that be?
It's virtual. So you can be sitting at your home in pajamas. And then
that sounds really fun. I'll definitely, when it comes closer, remind me, because I'll definitely promote about it.
Definitely. And then last but not least, I have a store that has pelvic health products called the Pelvic Floor Store.
Oh, interesting. I'm going to check that out. Yep. That's amazing. So, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure having you. For those listening, if you enjoyed this episode, take a screenshot of it, share it on your story, let people know that it's okay to say the word vagina. It's totally fine. Send it to a friend. Maybe you guys do talk about it, but maybe they've been struggling with their pH balance or odors, or maybe they douche and are like, don't do it. Like, send it to them. And if you're not subscribed to the podcast, a new episode comes out every Tuesday and Thursday. And when you're subscribed, you don't miss a beat. So as always, this is Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.